What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode here of Walking Manifestator. I'm your host, Alexa Benya. And in today's conversation, I want to talk about things that you can actively do and perspectives you can adopt when you feel like everything is crumbling. And I know that most people are sometimes annoyed by the concept behind positive thinking and thinking that positive thoughts are going to help you in actually navigating through a negative situation. So I really want to give you some perspectives. I'm going to have some notes that I'm going to be referring back to. We're also going to have a PDF workbook that you are more than welcome to download. It'll be on our community, so feel free to click down on the link, go directly to the community so that you can go ahead and access this. And if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to click down below. All the details are going to be there. Now, when we are often faced with this perspective of going through something difficult, most of us have been conditioned to either avoid the situation, whether that is we go into this mindset of ignoring everything and we just kind of focus on work, we focus on your kids, you focus on something that is going to distract you. Sometimes that might be substance abuse, that might be other types of abuse that you are doing to your body. And this is where it's important to understand the concept behind the actual soul contract, but also the psychological perspective. So I am going to give you 2 examples on each one of these 5 principles that I want you to really just think about and just take some time to really analyze, see what resonates with you, discard what doesn't, but this is how we grow. And we've talked about this in the past. If you are somebody that is actively working on yourself, this is how you get to evolve. This is how you get to really grow in your understanding by doing the work. And let's be honest, most people, they rather avoid these conversations because it's easier. I was talking to a person recently, and when we were having these conversations, I was noticing a lot of the patterns that they have played out in the past. And of course, as I was mentioning these things to the person, she was kind of like, yeah, I know, that this is something I'm doing, but I'm okay with it because it's just part of my coping mechanism. And honestly, guys, that is something that I did for the longest time. And sometimes even to this day, when I have a situation that I'm trying to avoid, it's like, you know what, let me just focus on my work. Let me just focus on the next thing that I need to do. But it is important to understand how you're repeating these patterns, because if you don't take the time to really understand and dissect what you just went through and how you can take a different approach the next time, you're going to do the same exact thing. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So with that being said, let's get started on today's 5 points that we're going to be covering. And the first one is going to be the purpose of challenging in the actual soul contract concept. So I want to really talk about the challenges that you're going to experience in these situations. And I want to give you the perspective of a soul contract. So the first thing is that we're going to discuss how a lot of these things, when it comes to the perspective of the actual soul contract, works. And I shared with you guys briefly on my last episode, a soul contract essentially is a contract that you made before coming into this earth of experiences that you wanted to go through. And I know this might sound a little woo-woo to some people. I highly encourage that you do your own research. Like I said at the beginning, see what resonates with you, see what doesn't. These are teachings that I have personally grown to understand to a deeper perspective, and they resonate with me. But I also will give you the psychological perspective of this. And to make it easier to understand, basically, these are adversities that we go through, right? That they build resilience on the experience that we just encountered. So you can see it as this is a situation that I agreed at one point in time before coming to this earth that I want to experience in order for me to grow. Or you can see it from the perspective of psychological perspective, which is, hey, I actually needed to go through that situation with that person in order for me to actually grow resilience and be able to really evolve into the next best thing that I'm able to become. The role in shaping reality, this is very important to understand, because when we're talking about how these things are holding us back, most of the times we don't take the time to actually understand what this is actually teaching us. And something that I've talked about in the past is your paradigm. So There is a lot of books that will talk to you about your paradigm. And for those of you that don't know, a paradigm is basically a series of events that have happened in your life that have almost exclusive control over your habitual behavior, meaning things that have shaped you to be the way you are today. In my next podcast, we're going to talk about Vishen Lakhiani calls it rules, which is bullshit rules. And it's very important to actually understand these topics because it is something that has been shaped through the constructs of society. And if you don't understand how these beliefs that you have are actually not yours, you're going to keep playing out the same exact scenario, just with a different person and in a different place. Now, when we understand the psychological perspective, I want to read you one of my notes. It's the cognitive reframing that helps us transform obstacles into those opportunities. So by changing how we actually interpret these difficult situations, we can actually empower ourselves and actually grow from them. So if you see it from the soul contract perspective, it's that it's challenging you in order to help you evolve into your highest version. And if you look at it from the psychological, it's the cognitive reframing of how you're choosing to actually take in this information. And one of the things that a lot of people actually are talking about in the psychological world, I was hearing this doctor talk about, the emotional regulation that is important for us to actually process. And if you think about it, that is very true because most of us were taught to just coddle our kids, or maybe you had the far extreme, which was like nobody really paid attention to you and nobody really came to your aid when you needed somebody. Whichever extreme you were in, you actually weren't being taught how to regular your emotions. You were conditioned to actually suppress a lot of these emotions. And therefore, as you have grown up, you haven't really taken the time to understand, like, what did I learn from this experience? How did I play a factor in this experience? I was talking to one of our clients recently, joined Walking Manifestator coaching, and we were having this conversation. And I was like, okay, well, tell me more about your situation and some of the things that you've chosen in the past. And he was telling me, like, you know what, we went through this whole, bird's eye view, if you will, of his life and where he's at. And he came to the realization that he is choosing the same people, just different situations. And this is something that you might sit here and say like, oh, that's very easy. But sometimes we don't see our blind spots. And this is why it's important to really do the work to better understand yourself and how you're actually playing a factor in this situation. Now, the next point I really want to cover is the importance of embracing the uncertainty you're going through. Now, when it comes to a soul contract perspective, okay, the uncertainty is actually a tool that we have agreed to use to learn to trust the process. Now, from the actual psychological perspective, it's the behavior standpoint in which we're actually able to challenge these situations to get out of our comfort zone and actually foster this adaptability that we are experiencing. And the key point here that we really want to highlight is embracing this uncertainty actually helps us, right? It's going to help us in this evolution of better understanding ourselves. And I really wanted to make sure that these were notes you could really refer back to, which is why I put this PowerPoint together for you guys, because it is important to understand how these things play this role, as we said, but at the same time, how you can take an active effort to really understand what it is that you are actively doing that is keeping you in that exact same cycle that you've been in, that you have continuously put yourself in, and that you will continue to do because you haven't really learned the lesson and you really haven't understood what you needed to understand from that situation. Now, the last 2 points that we're going to talk about is rebuilding self-identity. Now, this is something that you really want to understand from 2 perspectives. The obvious one from the soul contract is that as you're evolving in this planet, as you are evolving in these teachings, you're going to better understand yourself and also who you're choosing to allow in your energy. Now, a lot of the times that takes you having very, very clear boundaries. Most of us, and I know I've done that for a long time, and I have recently gotten very clear on what my non-negotiables are. And this is something that most of us haven't been taught. And just because you weren't taught these things doesn't mean that that is not something you can learn. There's this one teaching that really resonated with me that I wanted to share with you guys, and that's It doesn't matter if you are worried about your past and how everything played out in your past. If you can actually decide that you want to change your present now, the current reality that you're living in, this actually affects your entire past, because the version of you has changed to such a significant point in which you are no longer that same entity. You are no longer that same person. You have evolved to such a degree in which that paradigm in reality, because again, perception is your reality. Your reality is your perception. So it's not that you're actually seeing the world as what it is. You're seeing the world in the perception of what you choose to see. This is why some people might see a flower. Meanwhile, the other person is going to go down the street and actually see, oh gosh, it's such a horrible day. It's so windy outside. Your perception is what's really going to play a factor here. And this is why reframing the programming and reframing the way you view things is so important in this process. Now, the last thing is really the power of the choices that you have. And every decision that we're making is really helping us navigate to our soul evolution. And this is why I wanted to title this podcast, How to Stay Positive When You Feel That You Can't Stay Positive. Because a lot of us, we hear this perspective of, well, just, chin up, it's fine, you're gonna figure it out, everything's gonna work out. And in that moment, maybe all you needed was to actually allow yourself to feel your feelings. All you needed was to allow yourself to experience the experience you needed to feel. But because we haven't been taught emotional regulation and you were taught to suppress your feelings and avoid your feelings and disguise your feelings, you don't actually know how to do this. This is why I personally decided to stop drinking. I stopped drinking. I'm going on now my 3rd year actually. And it was something that at the beginning was actually very uncomfortable, because a lot of people, when I would tell them like, oh, I don't drink, they would look at me like if I had just told them that I was in like AAA, right? And nothing wrong with AAA, but I've never actually had any problem like that. I just decided I wanted to stop drinking because I felt that whenever I would drink, it was a coping mechanism. Even if I just had like 1 glass of whiskey with my steak or 1 glass of wine, I felt that it was something that my body was looking forward to. And I really have gone through this journey of trying to not be dependent of anything external. I want to bring these emotions and regular feeling and emotional intellect coming from my own awareness, from my own internal love and understanding. And I don't want to feel like I needed something to help me feel comfortable in whatever situation I might be. So when I would tell people, hey, I actually don't drink, they would ask like, oh, like, did you have a problem with drinking or something like that? And I'd be like, no, I actually just chose to stop drinking. And the people that I would feel comfortable enough with, I would share with them a little bit more about the vibrations and the energies and the frequencies that you're putting in your body really play a factor when you're trying to manifest and when you're looking to grow. And this is not to say I will never, ever, ever, ever have a glass of wine in my life, but at this point in time, I'm not interested in doing it. I'm not interested in actually putting that into my temple. And why is this important? It's because most of the times the people we're hanging out with are doing those same behaviors that are keeping us in that exact same mindset. Back to the point I was telling you guys with this person, we were talking, we were having that, coaching session. And I was asking that person like, hey, tell me more about some of the patterns that you have seen, that you have chosen. And this is the difference between when you're talking to a psychiatrist and, a psychologist. Obviously, do your own research, right? I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. But something that I've noticed is a lot of them, because I have family members that are in the psychology field, they won't tell you what it is that they can clearly see is the issue. And the reason they don't tell you is because if they tell you, you're going to actually be defensive and you're going to take it personal and you're going to take it as you're attacking me. So they want to lead the horse to the water for you to actually choose if you want to drink the water or not. What that means is you need to discover it. So in these conversations, when you're having like a coaching session, you're actually paying for somebody to just coach you and not from like let's take you this whole, 360 turnaround, 180 turnaround. What they're doing is like they're actually dissecting it to such a degree in which they're telling you like, did you catch X, Y, and Z? Because this is what you're doing. And this is like just an hour conversation talking with you. This is what you are repeating in your patterns. And it is important to have somebody in your life that is actually willing to call you out on the things that maybe you don't have the ability to call yourself out on at this time. So when you're going through a situation that feels like things are crumbling, this is an opportunity for, number one, you to understand that it's a soul contract that you have chosen to experience, to be in this life, in this moment in life, to actually learn from that mistake, situation, whatever the experience was. I don't think anything is a mistake. Some experiences are harder than others. I will 100% give you that. But I think that everything was divinely orchestrated by you, by God, by universe, all of the above connected in order for you to really tap into becoming that best version of yourself. And maybe this is going to trigger some people because they want to place the blame on somebody. I know far too well about that. I was somebody that all the stuff that I went through, I needed to find somebody to blame. I needed to find somebody to feel sorry for myself. I needed to find somebody that would find pity on my situation in order for me to keep recreating the same story over and over and over again. And that's why most of the times, if you recognize this, you're going to keep hanging out with people that are in that same vibration, because the moment that you're trying to talk about uplifting things and positive things and just like, let's go tackle on the world, they're going to look at you like you're crazy and telling them to do like the most despicable thing, because in their mind, that's just not something that's realistic, because that is not what they are personally comfortable talking about. They would rather continue to avoid these conversations. And remember one thing, we're all in a journey. We're all in a path, and every single person has their own timing. Everything is a stepping stone. So just because I recognize something in myself doesn't mean that my son is going to recognize that same thing at the same age that I recognized it. And it doesn't mean that just because there's certain things that you see other people recognizing, it doesn't mean that they don't have any moments of uncertainty. We're humans, okay? That's just what it is. It's part of, we're soul contracts. We're soul, we're the essence of our soul, okay? So we're spiritual beings having a physical experience in a human body. But when I say we're human, we still have those human tendencies of acting and reacting a certain way. The one thing that you can learn is that emotional regulation, to process and to understand, where is this coming from and how can I actively change it? So if this is something that you got value from, any feedback, anything that you feel that was a great takeaway, feel free to leave it down below on the comments, or share this podcast with a friend, somebody that you feel could benefit from listening to the message. I want to also invite you guys again to the community that we have for Walking Manifestator. On the school platform, there is a ton of free resources. We want to make this a community that is going to help you have tools available for whatever situation you might be going through, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's feeling unworthy, whether it's not knowing how to manifest, just tools that as a community we can learn from one another to really help you in this process. So if that is something you're interested in, feel free to join the community. It is completely free to join. You are going to love all the free workbooks that we have there for you guys. But again, as always, I just want to remind you that you have everything in your power to create the reality that you want. And just because right now things might feel like they're crumbling, just remind yourself that it's making room for that next big opportunity that you have just waiting for you. And it can't come into fruition until you make space for that to come into actual reality. So thank you again so much for tuning in. I'm sending you many, many great vibes, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one.